Sara Azari, I want to come over to you. You've been incredibly patient. You've been listening to all of this. And so, all right, you have this, we get it, very close to the president, this attorney who's now under criminal investigation. It's a huge, huge deal, right? That's the headline that came out this afternoon. Keep in mind, it was SDNY, it was the Southern District of New York, who pulled the trigger on the raids earlier this week. This is not Mueller, but this is where I'm going. Depending on what they find, they can use, they being prosecutors, can use it as leverage.
Absolutely.
Because this is a guy who knows where all the bodies are buried in the Trump world. Finish my thought.
Right. What the prosecutors will do is they'll pile on the charges based on whatever crime was committed after they conduct their investigation. And the more exposure that Michael Cohen faces, the more time he faces in prison, and the more likely, I'm speaking hypothetically, theoretically, the more likely it is that he might flip. But this is a guy that said that he would take the bullet for the president, so I'm not sure what it takes for him to flip. But it's absolutely leverage, because the more hot water that he's in, the more likely it is that he might flip on the president. And again, he apparently, now we know that he's just an extension of Donald Trump, because that might be his only client. And this attorney-client privilege that we've been discussing here is not absolute. It's, you first look and see whether the documents, the communications are privileged. Some of them may not be. As to those that are, then you look and see whether the privilege was waived, which appears that Donald Trump may have waived that privilege by what he said on Air Force One. And then you also look at any exceptions, like the crime fraud exception that might apply. And I just want to make a point in response to Asha. I always usually agree with her, but I do have a slight disagreement, which is the taint team is a self-serving mechanism within the DOJ. In other words, it's the DOJ that's doing this investigation, and it would be people within the DOJ who create a team who would vet and review these documents. As a defense attorney, I don't feel comfortable with that. And I think that even though it's probably not a reasonable request by Michael Cohen for his lawyers to review, because that's what they would have done in response to a subpoena. Obviously, there's a concern about that. I think it would be reasonable if the court would appoint a special master, an independent body that would, not the DOJ, not the lawyers, neither side, but an independent body that would review the communications, the items that were seized, to see whether or not they're protected by the privilege.